The hockey world has reached the Olympic break. We'll talk about who's hot, who's not, and the latest trends in the NHL. Plus, we'll preview some of the big games this week at the Olympics. All that coming up on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome to the Friday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. I'm Gil Martin of Locked On Islanders. I'm here each and every Friday with Rachel Donner of Locked On Flyers. And happy Friday, Rachel.
Happy Friday indeed.
Can you believe we have reached the Olympic break? How did we get this far into the season this fast?
I don't know. I did the math, and at least for the Flyers, who's obviously the main team I cover, there's only 26 games left of the season. Like, bonkers, absolutely bonkers.
Yeah, and one thing that I was kind of surprised about, I expected a little bit more trade action before the Olympic break, and other than the Artemi Panarin deal, there weren't a lot of major ones made.
Yeah, it's really interesting because we all kind of, and we in particular talked about the potential for some of the quote unquote bigger deals to happen prior to the Olympic break to kind of get ahead of it and maybe get a better deal. But I feel like a few teams made the deals that they were going to make earlier, and they were smaller, quieter, like tweaking sort of deals, like the Islanders, couple of trades that they made. And so, yeah, other than that, it was just Panarin. And even that seemed a little odd just because of where he wound up going to, right?
And how little I think the Rangers got in return as well. But,
I think Green Tree's a pretty good return there. I mean, the picks are definitely not as good as they could have or should have been.
And that's, I think, because Panarin kind of limited the options that the Rangers had. But, I think one big reason for the lack of action before the trade deadline is still that the standings are very tight and a lot of teams just aren't ready to sell yet.
Yeah, I think especially given just where everything is and where the teams are, we're going to get into that people are either waiting or there's injury factors at play. And I still don't think there's going to be a big trade deadline either, though.
Really? I mean, you think too many teams are going to say we're not selling and there's just not going to be a market? Or...
Well, I think it is going to be a seller's market, right? And so the buyers have to decide if they're willing to pay those kinds of prices right now, because there are like a whole bunch of teams, like the differentiation is starting to happen now, right? Where it's becoming more clear who the buyers and who the sellers are. And I think those prices are going to be very steep, and some teams may decide to just go with what they currently have.
And some teams may not be able to afford those prices or willing to spend what it'll take. And that's going to set up some very interesting critiques of some GMs who either pull the trigger and pay that high price or just say, you know what, we're like you said, we're standing pat and we're not going to pay that high price. And then depending on how those teams do, those GMs could come under some heavy criticism.
Yeah, I think so, because it is interesting because you see the pattern of, let's say, the Florida Panthers, right? For the past two Stanley Cup champions, they did make those deals, right? And it paid off for them. But that's kind of how that team has been constructed. Whereas other teams just don't have the space for that right now. And so I think it's going to be really fascinating, and it's going to be fast and furious once the Olympic break is over, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there was about 10 days in between the Olympic break and the trade deadline. So most
12,
teams will,
but yeah.
yeah, I mean, okay, I was estimating off the top of my head, but yes. So most teams will play 5 or 6 games over that time period. We're not talking about a lot of time to make more space between the haves and the have-nots and to sort out where everybody is. It's going to be fairly close to where we are right now.
Yeah, I think so. It is going to be a really interesting couple of weeks there leading up to the trade deadline, and especially when we see what the aftermath of the Olympics are, which we don't even know yet.
Right, exactly. So that'll be interesting. Out of all the 32 teams in the NHL, the one who probably is not happy about the timing of the Olympic break has got to be the Columbus Blue Jackets. I mean, here is a team that has just been on fire lately, and they've won 7 in a row, and now everything stops.
Yeah, it's tough for them. So ever since they made the head coaching change on January 12th, where they hired Rick Bowness, obviously a big change that always gives a team a boost, or usually gives a team a boost, let's say, when you make a coaching change like that. This was a team that was always kind of performing below potential. And that's why you make a coaching change, right? Because on paper, Columbus should have been better this season than they were the previous seasons, and they weren't. But since that day on January 12th, they have the highest point percentage in the NHL with 10 wins and 1 loss in that time period. Only one of those 10 wins was an extra time win, like a shootout win. So it's primarily regulation wins there. They have an absolutely stunning 3.91 goals for per game played. Columbus. And unlocking the offense of Columbus has been just a remarkable thing to see. And, it's a team that you talk about it because they've just sort of always been languishing there in the basement with rare playoff appearances. But, there is something to this team now, and it'll be interesting to see if they can regain that momentum like you're talking about.
Yeah, that's going to be tough. And look, 3 of those 10 wins have been shutouts. I mean, they're just playing such good hockey. They have a plus 19 goal differential in those 11 games. And yeah, the timing of the break has got to be disappointing for them under the circumstances. And the other thing is, they're still, if the season ended now, they're still kind of on the outside looking in, not by much, but they would not be in the playoffs right now. They're 4 points behind Boston for that last wild card with 1 game in hand.
Yeah, it is getting pretty close there, right? And so, we'll see what they can do after the break, but it is a very awkward time to kind of hit the pause button for sure.
Yeah, and then another team that's been red hot, the Tampa Bay Lightning, 5 in a row, 8-1-1 in their last 10. And right now, they've got the best goal differential in the Eastern Conference with a plus 59 goal differential. I think they're another team that's kind of disappointed as to the timing of this Olympic break.
Yeah, I don't know. I think for them, the way that Cooper coaches that team, and first off, we know Cooper's going off to coach Team Canada, right?
Right.
So he's going to be busy during the break, and it's not going to really affect him. We know he's the consummate professional given his longevity there, right? So given the fact that the core of this team has the experience, and some of them are playing in the Olympics, obviously, I truly think this is the kind of team that it doesn't matter. They're going to be fine. They can pick up where they left off because they're so well managed.
They're well managed, and they have a lot of playoff experience. They've been there, done that, especially the leadership of this. And they've got, some of these guys have Stanley Cup rings to show for it. But I still think that there is something to when you're on a hot streak, you just don't want to disrupt the hot streak.
Sure, I get that. I just feel like of any team, like they're the team that's going to be least affected by taking the break.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. We've got more to get to on today's show. We'll talk more about some of the team trends and where teams are at heading into the Olympic break, and we'll preview some of the big games for both the men and the women at the Olympics. All that and more coming up on today's Locked On NHL podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It's the last call for football this season on FanDuel. One final Sunday, one last kickoff, the final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. This is Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel is making sure you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. Whether you're backing the favorite, riding with the underdog, or building one last same-game parlay, this is the game everyone's been waiting for. This is where predictions turn into plays, stats turn into storylines, and every snap feels bigger. It's the perfect way to cap off the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from kickoff to the final whistle. And if you're a new customer, bet just $5 and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Make it count, because after the Super Bowl, the season is over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So what other teams and trends have caught your eye here as we head into the Olympic break?
Well, we've talked about like the divisional divide in each conference, right? That's becoming more and more apparent, as especially in the East, where you have the Atlantic being so much stronger than the Metro division here, right? Where it's pretty much impossible for any Metro team not in the top three to make the playoffs. Like those two wildcard spots are going to be Atlantic teams when all is said and done.
It looks that way right now, although, Columbus may have something to say about that before it's all said and done. And yet, yeah, I mean, I think part of it is right now, the two wild cards are Buffalo and Boston. And I don't know how many people had those two teams on their bingo cards for making the playoffs this year.
I mean, sure. I think that's part of it, right? Where you have those couple of teams, you have a couple of teams in the East or in the Metro performing a little bit better. And that's like boxing out some of the other teams in the Metro you thought might have had a chance. Yeah. And then you have teams in the Atlantic overperforming with like Buffalo and Boston for sure. I think people probably expected Montreal to be good this year. I don't know if it's like second place good, but good for sure. Detroit was like we've been waiting on this Detroit for like 5 years now. Yes. And so, maybe you were in denial that it was actually going to happen, but Detroit has played, some mixed results, but right. Overall, the trend has been good.
It has been. And, this is a team that, like you said, people have been waiting on for so long and I think Buffalo to an extent as well, where, this team has a solid young core. With Detroit, it's when is the Yzer plan finally going to pay dividends? And with Buffalo, it was like, when is this young core finally going to put it all together? And, right now, those two teams are riding high, but then you've got teams like Toronto and Florida that a lot of people expected to be in the playoff mix, and they're on the outside looking in.
Listen, it's hard to talk about the Toronto Maple Leafs because the expectations are always high, and on paper, they always seem like, okay, this could be the year, and they just can't get it together for whatever reason with this core. And so, what are they a team that you would expect? No. I think it's just hard not to project them given how they look on paper. But ultimately, do you think they're ever going to pull through here? I mean, no. The answer is no.
What is it, though? Is this a lack of leadership? Is there a missing ingredient in their lineup? What makes this team seemingly less than the sum of its parts?
I mean, there's a couple of things. That's coaching, first off. And it's it's also chemistry, right? It's maybe this, and they thought it was Marner. He's gone.
Right.
But it's making the right additions. It's not just the right subtractions, and maybe the right additions haven't been there, and the depth isn't there. They've obviously had mixed goaltending, so it is a very interesting case study in frustration and I think stats versus reality.
And you mentioned the disparity between divisions in the East. We've also got that disparity in the West, where the Central Division is very top heavy. You've got the big three of Colorado, Minnesota, and Dallas, and then you've got everyone else. But you look at Utah, who right now is in the first wild card spot, is fourth in the Central. They'd be in second place in the Pacific right now.
Yep. Yeah, that's what makes it tough for those Central teams. And will a Central team like Utah have a chance here? And then you look at them, and Utah only has one more point than the Seattle Kraken, who are the third place Pacific team. But I would say on average, Utah is probably a better team.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I would think they are. And yet, the only way they're getting into the playoffs is via a wild card spot based on, the distance between them and the big three being 13 points right now between Utah and Dallas. So that's interesting. Do you think the Ducks, who have been so up and down this year, they're on a bit of a hot streak now, 8 out of their last 10, they're in the second wild card spot. Do you think they can hang on and make the playoffs? They and the Kraken, to me, are kind of on the vulnerable side when it comes to making the playoffs.
Could be. I mean, that's what's going to make this Western Conference playoff race so interesting, right? Is this divisional divide going to affect things the way it's looking? But and then it's also looking at how the Olympic break is going to help or hurt some of these teams, and how each of these borderline teams, like the wild card teams especially, are going to look, in teams like Utah, teams like Anaheim, right? Are they going to be able to continue what they've been able to do recently, with some great success? But at the same time, like, is there room for anybody else to make a run here? And can any of those other teams below have a shot? I given the trends, I don't know that that's possible, but the break certainly gives those other teams more of a shot.
And the first team that comes to my mind would be the LA Kings. They're 3 points out of a playoff berth as of now. And they just got Artemi Panarin, who has yet to play a game for them. Do you think he'll have enough of an impact to get LA over the finish line and into the postseason?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we haven't seen Panarin play with LA yet, right? Because of the groin issue, and he'll hopefully rest over the break a little bit and be ready to go once they come back. So we'll see what that impact is, but who knows? I mean, it could end up being like the best trade they've ever made, or the worst trade, or more likely somewhere in the middle. But, I don't know that that's enough.
Yeah. I mean, they do need offense. I mean, that's definitely something they needed to add, but I don't know if it's enough either, and it'll be interesting to see. How about the Edmonton Oilers? Because they have been so hot and cold, and they're not securely in a playoff spot right now. Yeah, they're in second place in their division, but their margin for error is not great.
Yeah, the Oilers are a mystery to me, because they don't seem like they're together. Right. And, you have Leon Draisaitl basically coming out and saying, we're a mess. Like, we got to get it together. Right. And, yet they're sitting on a 3-game losing streak, sitting in still second place in the Pacific, but not feeling good about themselves, which is absolutely bonkers. But that's what this team is, right? Are they going to just kind of float and then get it together for the playoffs, or are they going to flame out? I think, like, either option is very possible with this team. And I think it's once again going to depend on the goaltending.
Yeah, and they've changed goaltenders, and you sort of wonder, did they make the right move picking up a goalie who has had consistency issues throughout his career as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's entirely true. That indecisiveness is, it's been a hallmark of this Oilers team of getting close but not reaching the mountaintop, right? And so this year is more confounding to me for them than either of the previous 2 years.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. And again, it just seems like when you make the Stanley Cup final 2 years in a row, you add the compressed schedule to that because of the Olympics. Maybe that's part of it also, that they're a little bit worn down as a team.
That could be. I mean, and that's what'll be important for this break here.
We shall see.
It changes everything.
Yeah, it certainly does. Everybody has an opportunity to regroup, get a little bit of rest, except for those players who are actually going to Milano to compete in the Olympics. But it's going to be a very interesting last 25 or so games down the stretch in the NHL after the Olympic break. Speaking of the Olympics, we're going to talk about some of the biggest games to watch at the Olympics coming up next.
If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important it is. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. Hiring Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed are 90% more likely to report a hire than non-sponsored jobs. You can spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of the show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now. Support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on Locked On NHL. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed.
Well, the women have already started over at the Olympics, and yet we've got some big games coming up as soon as Saturday, this weekend. Both the United States and Canada will be playing some important games, and we get our first look at Canada Saturday against the Swiss.
Yeah, very interesting matchup, only because, as we know, the first game for Team Canada, which was supposed to have been played against Finland, was postponed until the 12th because Finland has been dealing with a very nasty norovirus on their team, and they rescheduled their first game. So Canada's been kind of sitting on the sidelines here, right? Just chomping at the bit, waiting for their first game. So they're going to play that on Saturday. Meanwhile, the Swiss team will be coming off a game on Friday that went to overtime. As we're recording, it is the overtime of that game right now, but they battled back against a very tough Czechia team, got some greasy goals. And so the Swiss, it is Canada. We know that, but the Swiss are a team that are pretty hungry and are not going away easily, and they do have some big talent on that team. But our first chance to see Team Canada, of course, is the big story here for that one.
And then on the same day, you have Team USA facing Finland. What do you see from the Americans and their chances this year?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, this is more about Team Finland and can they ice a team, right? Yeah. And what are they gonna Are they going to be recovered from their illness enough to have the energy to match a relentless Team USA? And I think USA had a good but not great game against Czechia in their first matchup. And, there's certainly room for improvement. But the one thing that they are very good at is, even if they get off to a slow start, they are a relentless team that's going to push and push and push until the very end of the game. And so, I think this will be an opportunity for them to have a more complete game than they did against Czechia. And certainly I think that is what they're going to take a look at.
And then Tuesday is the women's matchup that everybody is looking forward to, at least here in North America. USA against Canada, the top two teams in the rankings, at least. Who do you think has the edge this time around?
Well, Team USA had the edge in the rivalry series, like just decimating Canada throughout. And I think Canada has a lot to prove here. But there's also like the mind game of the round robin games versus the medal rounds. And there's always like a psychological thing is if you win the preliminary game, like, are you going to win the medal round game? So obviously everybody cares about the outcome of this game, but ultimately I think it's about the two teams feeling each other out in terms of where the battles are going to be, what the matchups are going to be, and how to best, I think, optimize what your team can do out there. And I think the two factors here, like the main factor is the roster construction, right? The two difference between the two teams, that Team Canada went with entirely PWHL players and Team USA went with a mix of PWHL and college players and, you know, youth versus experience, and which strategy is going to win out in the end.
Going to be interesting, and always a great rivalry between USA and Canada in women's hockey. Over with the men, Thursday, Canada, Czechia. What do we expect? Team Canada so deep this year, so deep every Olympics, really.
Yeah, I think Czechia is going to be a fun, scrappy team to watch. They have a mix of NHLers and home country players that play in other leagues. And so, you know, they don't have as many of the marquee players there, but they have very good goaltending on Czechia. And I think, you know, a team with David Pastrnak on it, you can't count out under any circumstances.
And then on Friday, Team USA gets their game against Latvia. Latvia, you can't overlook them. They may not be the most talented team, but they always find a way to give some of the top teams a hard time. Yeah,
I think it should be fun. Like the atmosphere at Latvia games is always fun, regardless. Yeah. So I'm here for the vibes in this game, that's for sure. But, and you know, this will be a chance to see, like, does this Team USA have the right chemistry? There's some controversies about the roster and, you know, what are they going to look like out there in their first game?
Should be interesting, and always controversy about these rosters. There's always two or three guys you think should have made it, didn't make it, a couple of controversial choices. So how Team USA starts off will be certainly very interesting and something to watch for. Do you have a favorite in the women and the men's tournaments that, you know, who do you think is going to emerge victorious?
For the men's tournament, I just want to root for somebody. I don't really have any emotional stakes in the men's tournament, so I'm just rooting for Team Czechia because Dan Vladar, Flyers goaltender, is on the team. So that's kind of where I'm going there. I would have rooted for Latvia, honestly, too, but Rodrigo Abels is injured and won't be playing. So I'll root for them a little bit too, because again, they're always fun. On the women's side, I'm just a Team USA girl. That's just what it is. And as much as I love all the other teams for other reasons, like I do love Czechia on the women's side as well. Kaltenkova, who is on the New York Sirens, is one of my favorite players, and she's on Team Czechia, and they're coached by Carla McLeod, who coaches the Ottawa Charge in the PWHL, and I love her as a head coach too.
Nice, very nice. I mean, is having, you know, professional NHL players and PWHL players in the Olympics worth it with the way the schedule gets compressed and the season gets disrupted?
I mean, it's worth it for the players, and that's all I care about. If they care, I care.
Okay, that's fair. I go back and forth. I feel like at times, I think there have been more injuries this year as a result of the compressed schedule. And I think we've seen some games where teams are just flat out tired as a result of the compressed schedule. But once the Olympics start, I love it, and I can't look away. So I have very mixed feelings about it, but it certainly will be interesting to see how this all plays out. If you never miss an episode of your favorite team's podcast, well, the Everydayer Club is built for you. You can get your favorite team's show ad-free, plus you'll get access to the members-only Discord server and more. So head to the link in the show notes to get more information about the Everydayers Club. That is going to do it for us today. I will be back on Monday talking to 3 of our local hosts about the biggest stories from around the hockey world. I can't just say the league right now with the Olympics also going on. And we are here every day, Monday through Friday. We also have Locked On NHL Game Night. Any night there's a game, we will be bringing you all the biggest stories from that. So that's on the Locked On NHL channel as well. Have a great weekend, everybody. Enjoy the Olympics, and thanks for listening to and watching the Locked On NHL podcast.